Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone is having a wonderful holiday with friends, families, and those that you love and care about. This video, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, and also assimilation and acculturation, because in the previous video, as you all know, sorry, my voice, sorry, it didn't come out very well. I'm not sure why, but it just didn't. And so, with that being said, I'm doing this one. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about is kind of give the definition of what each of those mean and how it can be utilized in the here and now as far as today. So one of the things that I wanted to define, of course, we're going to do all the definitions, and then we're going to provide examples of that. So, number one, intergenerational trauma. So by definition, let me bring out my handy dandy huge book. Look at this. Oh my gosh. So, what does intergenerational trauma mean, right? Okay. Intergenerational trauma means the transmission of historical oppression and its negative consequences across generations. Okay. So, all that pretty much is indicating is that for those of us who are of minority culture, especially, right, and of indigenous cultures, a lot of our family members have gone through oppressive situations. So for a great example of this is my grandmother. She lived on a plantation style camp, or lived on a plantation camp, and the way how she was raised is that in order for them to get food and resources, they had ration tickets. And if they wanted to get extra ration tickets, her sister and herself, they would wash clothing of the people that would provide the ration tickets. And they would then be afforded extra ration tickets so that they could get food. On the plantation style camp, they would live there, obviously, and they would also go to school there. And how it was set up, or as what she had told me, is that the quarters would be set up based off of ethnicity. So like the Portuguese people would be on one place, Hawaiian people would be on one place, Chinese people, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that I realized is when I was, spending so much time with her, is that she would do certain things to make sure she had abundance of certain things within her house, like canned food. She had tons of canned food, just like toilet paper. She had tons of toilet paper, and she had abundant amount of rice. Like you could never have enough rice, and like those sort of resources. And a good example of this would be when I was smaller. I had really long hair and I had really, really dark skin. And one of the things is that I remember one time I was crying in the bathtub, and my mom came running inside there and was saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" to my grandma. And my grandma said, "Well, I'm taking this stuff off, like I'm washing her." And so my mom was like, "What? I don't understand what you're doing." And she goes, "I gotta take this dirt off her. I gotta take this dirt off of her, right?" And she was like, almost like in this gaze, like in this, doing her own deal. And my mom looked at her and said, "That's not dirt, that's her skin," because I was so dark. And my grandma turned around and said, "Yeah, I gotta take care of this. She don't can have this." And so that just goes to show you that the kind of trauma that she had gone through. And at that moment in time, what she was doing was not doing nothing more than trying to take care of her granddaughter to ensure that nothing would happen and that I would be taken care of, because she knew whether it's a subconscious thought process or a conscious thought process, that she was aware or not aware at that moment, that she knew that I was going to be put in a position of discrimination, So she was trying to take care of it for me, but probably not in the right way. But at her thought process, it was the right way. So that happened to me when I was just a couple years old already. So that was one of the things, right? So intergenerational trauma, right? Because that was already being passed on to me. So historical trauma. Historical trauma is a cumulative emotional and psychological wounding over the lifespan and across generations. So kind of like the same thought process again, right? So when that had occurred, it was already imprinted in my mind from the time I was a young kid, like something's wrong here, something wrong with me, like because I had dark skin. Like, okay, well, my grandma told me that it's dirt. Oh, like my skin is dirty, I didn't know why, but I knew something was up, And then coupled alongside with when I reached kindergarten, I had a Asian teacher that, because I couldn't sleep, during the day, well, everybody would sleep during nap time. And if they couldn't sleep, they had the ability to read books on their mat. Because of my ethnicity and my color of skin, I got to stand up on my mat the whole entire nap time, while everybody else had the ability to read or nap. Why that is that I have to stand up? So there we go, right, with the historical trauma, because then it became almost like an onion, right? Here goes the layer, one more layer to add on to the fact that, okay, something's wrong with me, something's up here. And so as time progressed, there was more and more situations where I was put in that was almost repeated and solidified that something was up, like something was wrong. And it wasn't wrong necessarily with me internally as an individual. It was my exterior shell that I wasn't like the rest of everybody else. And so you have those stories, right, that I'm sure everybody else have these kinds of stories, coupled with the fact that you have the outside society telling you, if you're of native descent or even of another minority descent, hey, you're this, oh, guess what, you're less than, you don't belong here with us, and you don't blend, you know what I mean? So here you are, not feeling like you are part of that community, right, the outside bigger society, and then you have your own society telling you you don't necessarily fit in because you don't meet certain criterias or whatever. So you have that trauma as well. And so there's an ongoing issue as well included with that. And the other thing, like I was talking about in the other video, is that not only are we faced with those adversities, but we're also faced with the adversities of having labels, right? So in our own thought process as we get older, we come to realize like, hey, I want to probably explore these different viewpoints as far as religion or my own thought process about spirituality, so now you have to uphold those standards, and sometimes in our society they don't agree with those standards. Or my sexual orientation is where I like women, or I only like men, or whatever, or I like both, or whatever the case might be. So now you have that hat you have to wear, and you have to struggle to try and uphold that, because our society is not necessarily embracive. It would like to embrace that, just like some people are very much have a viewpoint on eating certain kinds of foods where maybe they don't like to eat meat, so they are choosing to become vegan or pescatarian or vegetarian. And in our society, in certain parts of the world or wherever, even in the US, certain states will, in cultural areas, communities will say, put you down or whatever, or will start having these debates with you, right? Like, why don't you eat meat? Animals are put on this earth for us to eat. That's what they're there for. And so because you're making that choice to not eat meat or fish or whatever, now you have that hat you have to wear, and so it's not just ethnicity issues you're dealing with, right, or your minority issues. You also have to deal with those other labels as well, socioeconomic class. You don't fall into that category of the very affluent, but you're not, middle, but you're not real low. And then the struggle to go from maybe your family was of a lower class, socioeconomic class, but because you worked so hard, you moved yourself to a different socioeconomic class. And then you have people in that class that will say, I don't care. You don't belong here. You don't fit here. So there's that struggle as well. So moving on, right? So now we have to deal with, here's my other paper, acculturation and assimilation. So this kind of where my segue goes into those two areas, like how I was telling you, right? Like those different labels. So acculturation is members of one cultural group that adopts the beliefs and behaviors of another group. So you start adopting their common attitudes or values. So kind of like what I was talking about, right? So like the different labels, whether it's a socioeconomic class or a different thought process with your choice of food or how you eat or sexual orientation or whatever the case may be, even politics, whatever, assimilation, process by which a person or a group's language and or culture come to resemble those of another group. So you kind of, the simple way of putting that is that you're dressing or talking or walking to blend in to that bigger cultural group or that bigger society that's there. So that's something that we all do, but yet at the same point we're trying to hold on to what we find dear to us, endearing to us. So for example, like with myself being a Kanakamole, right? Like I'm up here, you hear my accent, real hardcore, right? And no matter how much I try to get rid of it, it'll always be there. I'm sorry, that's how it is. You know what I mean? And yet, because of my educational background and stuff, I have a doctorate, right? And my licensure and stuff. With all of that, people will make certain assumptions, right? And so it's even more of a struggle to try and keep myself in that field because people will make certain assumptions based off of that. Not only that, I'm a female, you know what I mean? So I have those labels too as well. So you have to try and learn how to be able to assimilate into that subculture, right? Which is that field, and yet be able to hold on to that cultural values and morals and beliefs that I hold very, very dear to my heart, because I'm not going to let go of that. That's important to me. I'm sorry, you may not like it, but that's who I am, and I'm going to hold on to that. I don't care where I am. So I'm up here in the mainland. I understand that. And yes, I understand that I'm a doctor. I get that too. But guess what? Just because I'm a Kanakamo'ole and I'm a doctor doesn't mean that I'm going to remove who I am as the core of myself, my sense of self. I'm always still going to be a human being. I'm always going to be Hawaiian. I'm always going to be who I am. I'm not going to get rid of that just because I'm supposed to fit in that mold that what a doctor is supposed to look like, or what one person with a doctorate degree is supposed to look like, and one female no less. Yeah, sorry, that's not going to work. And so that's my choice though. Everybody has choices in life, right? And that's how it is. And my point to all of this is bringing this back to like when I'm looking at the aha. I think what is important for us to remember and to understand is that even though we have all these differences, right, and we have all these differences of opinion, that is okay. That's what makes life so unique. That's what makes life interesting, and that's what makes people interesting. We don't want things to be status quo where everybody's all so similar and everything is so the same, because then it would be so boring. And each of us have gifts, and that's what is really important. However, we have to think what is in the best interest of our people right now. That's what's important. So when I do these videos, right, and when I got into this, the thought process I thought about all of this is this very thing. And what I thought was, what is in the best interest of our people? What is in the best interest of future generations? Because I may not agree with everything that's going on. That's fine. What I do need to make sure, if I get into that seat, is that I'm trying to be the voice for those that cannot be in that right now. That's what's important. And that's all I care about. You know what I mean? Because I want to make sure our people have the ability to have a voice and be heard for generations to come. That's all I care about. You know what I mean? And we need to be sure that we all unify together. That's all. That is the most important thing that we need to look at, is that we unify as one. Because if we continue to have disagreements within ourselves, how are we supposed to be able to fight and get what we need long term? That's the thing that we need to look at. We need to be able to have unity, and we need to be able to recognize and accept that we are all different, and that is okay. But when we're looking at how are we to move forward into this with this whole the only way we're going to be able to get through this and get through this in a positive manner and have a successful outcome is if we put our differences aside and we unite as a people, as one, so that we can then interact, show unity and strength, like how we have always been for generations before. So hopefully everybody has heard this video now and everybody can hear me clearly. And I am hopeful that this has provided some guidance and thoughts as far as where I'm coming from in all of this. So have a great day, everybody, and I'm sure I'll make more videos, of course. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to get in contact with me. Aloha, you all.